Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk a bit about my story and in particular two questions that I get asked a lot everywhere I go. The first is, how did you get involved working with TCKs, doing this kind of research? And the second is, are you a TCK yourself? And the answers to those in short are accidentally and sort of. So let me elaborate by telling you a bit about my story. So I grew up most of my life in Australia. I moved between cities when I was 8, but just always within Australia. My parents had both been born in Australia, my grandparents had all been born in Australia, which is quite unusual actually. But when I was 13, my family moved and lived in the US for 2 years, and so for that time my sisters and I attended local public schools in Connecticut, not very far from New York City. At the time, there weren't a lot of cross-cultural resources made aware to us, and so I didn't know anything about third culture kids and what that meant until I started working with TCKs myself. But the story was, it was an assignment for my dad's job, so we all moved over there because the school years are out of whack between Australia and the US, and because my dad's transfer got delayed a little bit. I finished grade 8 in Australia, did the first quarter of grade 9, then we moved. I did the last quarter of grade 8 in the States and graduated from a school I'd been at for like 6 weeks, which was very strange. Did all of grade 9, half of grade 10 there, then moved back to Australia to start grade 11. Which was a bit of a mess academically, but that was life. Repatriation was rough, and I didn't understand why until years and years later. I talk to a lot of TCKs now who as adults first heard about this terminology and were like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to me. And that was my experience. Even though it was only 2 years, it was 2 years that really interrupted a lot of things for me. I found quite difficult on a lot of levels. And so even though my identity isn't strong in being a TCK, it's definitely had a huge impact on who I am. I remember talking to Ruth Ann Reckon about this. She's co-author of the classic TCK Bible, Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds, which I will reference constantly because it is the TCK Bible. And she was saying to me, you know, don't deny that experience. It doesn't matter how long you are overseas, you are still a TCK and you can own that. And so most of the time I do. I'll say, yes, I am a TCK. But I know that for me, being Australian is a bigger part of my identity in terms of forming a concrete connection to a country that a lot of TCKs didn't have. So I feel like I'm an Australian who had a TCK experience. That's kind of more my feeling about what happened to me. Now, fast forward a lot of years, I had moved to Beijing. I'd been living there for about 18 months, I guess, had started a new job, and a new friend there, well, who I'd known before I took the job, was just appointed to run the youth group for the biggest international church in China. And he kept bugging me to come along and come to youth group with him and help out. And I was really not interested. I had done some youth work in Australia, some volunteer mentoring and things like that. But I'm like, no, now I'm a working person and I have this working life, and I don't know. I had all these excuses and reasons not to. But eventually one week I was worn down and I decided to go, and I loved it. I loved these kids. There was something that I just clicked and I felt at home, and I sort of went every week after that. But very quickly I realized there was something different about these kids, and that some of the answers I was giving didn't quite fit. And I did a lot of learning. Within 6 months, 9 months, I'd learned a lot about their experience, again, without knowing any of the background literature. It had been about 18 months, I reckon, before I got in my hands that book, The Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds. And as I read it, especially when I got to section repatriation, and I read through these experiences and I just went, check, 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 check. Oh, that's what happened to me. And I suddenly had language and validation for the feelings I'd gone through and what I'd found difficult about that experience as a teenager. Anyway, I mean, I was really quickly hooked. And so for years I was just a volunteer, mentoring and going to youth group and helping run these large scale events for like 100 to 200, sometimes 250 people in China, bringing together kids from different parts of the country sometimes. After about, oh gosh, I don't know, 7-8 years of doing this as a volunteer, I realized that this actually really mattered to me. I had been thinking about moving back to Australia and being normal, getting a normal job and being a normal Australian. And the closer the date came to that, the more I realized I felt kind of depressed. That wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to choose this unconventional life, and working with and advocating for TCKs was really important to me. One day it finally occurred to me, I don't need to start a career. I've already started it. It might not be a conventional career, but I've already invested a lot of years in this population, in this field, in knowing and growing and building connections, and this is what I want to do with my life. So I rearranged everything and moved back to the city and started doing a bunch of stuff. And I started being asked to speak to different groups, to mentor young youth leaders who were working with people, to speak to teachers, to parents, to youth workers. I got asked to speak to a couple of groups and a conference, and it was strange because for the first time I wasn't just working with the kids, I was working with the parents and the adults around them, and realizing that there were a lot of things that to me was second nature about TCKs, about who they are, what they need, and how to best serve them, that were completely unknown to these other populations. And that often there were just a few small hints, a few small pieces of information that I could give to a parent that would totally revolutionize their relationship with their kid. And I started to shift my focus and into creating resources, which eventually turned into writing the book Misunderstood. So that's kind of how I got into it. I think for me now, I find myself in a place where I love working with third culture kids, and yet I spend most of my time now working on behalf of third culture kids, working with parents especially, but also schools and educators to advocate for their needs. Partly because it occurred to me I could spend an hour a week with a kid for years, mentoring them and investing in their lives, and that's so worthwhile and helpful. But I could spend 2 hours with a parent and have way more impact on the kid that way, because I started meeting so many parents who were so well-meaning, well-intentioned, loved their kids, were doing their best, and were anxious and afraid and sometimes just missing a mark and misunderstanding their kids out of just a lack of basic knowledge. It wasn't that they were doing anything wrong, they just didn't know how their kids felt about their experience. And I could give them just a few hints that would help them have different conversations and invest in different skills for their kids. And I found that really rewarding, because it felt like a more effective way to work on behalf of these kids. So that's a lot of what I do now, is taking this time I've spent listening to kids, continuing to have those conversations with third culture kids, and taking that knowledge and translating it to parents who want to help their kids, who want to love their kids well, who want to make the most out of their international experience. And so that's why I do what I do. I do what I do because I believe that being a third culture kid doesn't need to be all there is about a person. But I think that unresolved grief is a big issue, and I want to help kids and parents deal with that so it's not a problem. I think there's a lot of parents who feel really anxious and guilty unnecessarily, and that there's a lot that they can do to mitigate the potential downfalls that they see. And that's really what this channel is going to be about too, is providing you some of those resources and making that open to a wider group of people. So please keep sending questions, and I would love to answer them for you. Hope that gives you a bit of an idea about who I am and what I do and why I do it. There'll be much more to come. So thanks for listening. Bye.